Mr. President, last year we gathered here to debate this issue, and, I think it's really important to point out that everyone in this body has the same heart when it comes to this issue, and that is that we want to make sure that victims that are assaulted in our military are protected and supported, that the system is highly trained and professional, that perpetrators have due process, but also are put in prison if the system finds them guilty. The difference is an honest policy difference over which system would better accomplish those goals. Now, we've agreed on so much, and I think it's important to point out the work that the Congress has done reforming sexual assault in the military. Last year, we had over 26 different provisions that were enacted into law. This year, we haven't stopped. We have 13 more provisions in this piece of legislation. There's a disagreement over which system would protect victims better. The historic reforms, commanders have been stripped from their ability to overturn convictions. They're being held accountable under rigorous new standards and oversight. Every victim who reports now gets their own independent lawyer to protect their rights and fight for their interests. It's now a crime for any member to retaliate against a victim who reports a sexual assault. And the good soldier defense has been removed, and dozens of more. And yes, there were panels that looked at this issue. One that was just referenced by my colleague from Iowa was Dakowitz. They heard no witnesses from expert witnesses. They heard a brief presentation by myself and Senator Gillibrand, but they didn't spend days on it. Whereas the systems response panel put in place by this Congress spent weeks and weeks examining this, heard from dozens and dozens of witnesses from every side of the issue. And by the way, this panel was made up of a majority of civilians, majority women, and it voted overwhelmingly to reject an approach that removes commanders from their responsibility and their duties, and therefore their accountability. One of the members of this commission is the woman that runs the Victim Center at the Department of Justice for the entire country. Her quote, "I went into this thinking Senator Gillibrand's legislation made sense, but when you hear the facts, it just doesn't hold up." She was joined by a liberal icon, a feminist icon, Liz Holtzman, who was the author of the Rape Shield statute here in the United States Congress when she served as a representative. She too spoke out, saying once she understood the system and understood the facts, she agreed that keeping commanders accountable was crucial. Now, have we seen progress? It is one thing to have anecdotal information. It is another to have a statistically valid survey. The same survey that shows that retaliation is still a stubborn problem that we can't give up on also showed some very important data. So if you're going to argue that retaliation is continuing a problem, you're relying on the very same survey that tells us the following. Incidents are down. That's meaningful progress, dropping 29% just in the last 2 years. Reporting continues to go up, which was our stated goal as we began these reforms. Reports are up 70% from 2012. Back in 2012, only 1 in 10 victims were reporting. We have that down to 1 in 4. That is not spin. That is facts. These victims are coming forward because they have renewed confidence that they will have support, that they will get good information, and that the system is not stacked against them. Increased reporting occurred in all categories. The number of unrestricted reports are up, and restricted reports are up. And, importantly, the number of reports that victims converted from restricted to unrestricted. Furthermore, they went around the country and did focus groups with victims. This was RAND. This wasn't the military. This wasn't the Department of Justice. This was the RAND Corporation that, well known for its ability to do statistical information, went around the country and did focus groups, 11 different focus groups on different bases with just victims, and asked victims to come forward and participate in a survey. In that survey, and this is really important, Mr. President, 82% agreed that their unit commander supported them. 73% were satisfied with their unit commander's response, and 73% said they would recommend others report if they were a victim of sexual assault. And this is really important. The Gillibrand Amendment does nothing to combat retaliation. The recent RAND survey found that the majority of reported retaliation does not come from commanders. It comes from peers. This is a cultural problem we have to get after. And certainly I would stand ready to work with Senator Gillibrand, Senator Grassley, and all of my colleagues to look and see what we have to do to get at this peer-to-peer retaliation, which was the vast majority of what was reported. And finally, the Gillibrand Amendment actually weakens punishment for the crime of retaliation. By moving retaliation from Article 92 to Article 93 of the UCMJ, it would actually reduce the maximum punishment for this crime. And it finally prohibits the resources necessary to get at this problem. The amendment says we cannot add any additional resources to get after this. Historic reforms have been made. They are working based on data and talking to dozens and dozens of prosecutors and untold victims. As a former sex crimes prosecutor who cares about nothing more than taking care of victims and making sure they have due process and are respected and deferred to, I must urge this body to reject the Gillibrand approach, which removes commanders from being held accountable where they must be held accountable. Thank you, Mr. President. I urge a no vote on the Gillibrand Amendment.